Coming up this week, should there be an independent review of MP expenses? Also, what is the biggest issue facing Canada today? This and much more to come. Hitting the streets, this is Outburst. Hello and welcome to Outburst. I'm Glenn McGuinness. Well, expenses of MPs and their staffers have been making a lot of waves here in Ottawa recently, especially with the disclosure of moving expenses of two of the Prime Minister's top staffers. In the past, Auditor General Michael Ferguson has called for an independent assessment of MP expenses, as well as Justin Trudeau, just before the 2015 election was called. So we took the first topic to you, our question. Should there be an independent review of the expenses of MPs?
I don't know. I think there should be some checks and balances for them. And obviously that's what gets the press all the time when some MP spends $15 for a glass of orange juice. But in the grand scheme of things, that's not where our problems are, right? I think it's setting principles, and they should be held accountable. But the last thing I want to do is spend another $10 million to have some accounting firm investigate what they're spending there. Just why don't they give them a stipend and they have to live within that budget?
We just tend to accept everything they spend without really looking into it. The general public has a kind of do not care attitude until something wrong pops up. But if there are independent reviews on a constant basis, I think there would be far more concern for it.
I should think so,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, they do a good job, they work hard. Some of them less than others, I guess. That's why it should be investigated.
Depending on who's on the independent committee, as long as they really are independent.
It's great to see, but I think as soon as you put in place accountability, wherever there's a situation where there are people in power, there's always a way of potentially abusing those systems. If you could create something that was more independent and able to identify how resources are being used, then fantastic.
The Senate issue was the fact that the rules were never that clear. It allowed, and basically if you're submitting expenses, you look at, okay, is this allowed or not? And you could argue, okay, you should have had a little bit more of a moral standard to things. But nonetheless, if you make very clear rules with clear boundaries, there should really be no problem. So I wouldn't see that there any problem in having clear boundaries and rules for MPs and senators.
No, I don't think so. If it's reviewed properly, it's reviewed. Maybe there should be a bit of transparency there, but I mean, give the guys a chance. It's a lousy job anyway, and their terms at the whim of the voter, and give them a break. That's all I say. Yeah, it's small money that they're spending in comparison to the huge programs they put through, which are at taxpayer expense.
Yeah, everybody has to be held accountable. Like I said, if I've got to be held accountable, for what I spend my money on, and not only to my wife, but also to the banks. Why can't I pay this bill? Why can't I pay my MasterCard? Why can't I pay my mortgage? They're holding me accountable, and I believe that the party leaders have to be held accountable as well. And if that's done by an independent review party who is looking at it and saying, okay, let's look at this from an outsider looking in, by all means, I fully support that.
Yes, absolutely. I think everybody should be held accountable, no matter what your position is, whether you're a government worker or, working any sort of a job. I think the public is held accountable for the money that they spend, and I think government workers should be the same.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know, it's one thing for you to do your review of your own finances, and you kind of make excuses and you kind of find ways to justify it, and then but if someone else comes in who has nothing to do with it and can look objectively, you probably find a lot more.
Yeah, there should. Mostly because it's somebody who doesn't have a vested interest in the expenses, so a third party takes care of that.
If you have an independent review, who's going to pay their salaries? Will it be strictly unbiased? I don't know. I would like to think so, of course, but yeah, I guess if all the the details were made known to the public on that fact, then I'd be open to hearing about them anyway, making that decision.
My question is what happens afterwards? There were a lot of expense scandals, and they repay them and whatnot, but how is that being repaid? We're dealing with the whole Mike Duffy affair. That concerns me.
There should be an independent, because there's a lot of probably money that hasn't been looked at, and they're shuffling things around. People really don't know where they are with expenditures, and people take advantage. So yeah, I think there should be.
It's definitely important to have somebody who isn't politically swayed to the right or the left. I think there's more honesty when it comes to that. I think that there's more, just morally, it's better for a government. It's more democratic. So yeah, I think that there should be a separate independent review from an outside group or panel or a person or something.
Well, the easier thing would be to have real transparency, which would be to have maybe legislate that we should have the members' expenses visible all the time. Any citizen in Canada should be, anyone in Canada, anyone in the world should be able to look up, the MP for Bow Valley and see what he's spending our dough on a continual basis. And that would give us transparency. Having another independent review is going to take place in the shadows anyway, because we never see the results. It's just a bunch of talk.
How many points does the maple leaf consist of on the Canadian flag? 10, 11, or 12?
10.
I'm going to say 12.
12? I don't know. I heard this recently, though. I just can't remember.
10.
I'd say 12, but...
11.
It is 11, my friend.
Oh, it is?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The maple leaf on the Canadian flag consists of 11 points. October 20th and 22nd mark the 2-year anniversary of the terror attacks that took place in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu in Quebec after a Canadian soldier was mowed down and killed by a vehicle, and also the killing of Corporal Nathan Cirillo at the National War Memorial right behind me. Cirillo's attacker then made his way to Centre Block in Parliament Hill, where he was gunned down himself. So as we reflect on these events, we posed this question: how concerned are you about terrorist threats in Canada?
There's always a threat. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would say I'm still at a threat level 8. There's always going to be that threat. There's always going to be that scare. A lot of people feel safe in Canada, and I think that's a very unsafe thing for them to feel safe. If it can happen anywhere, why not pick on Canada because we feel safe?
As concerned as, I guess, anyone would be, obviously there's a lot of unrest going on in lots of different places in the world. There are news articles being published, frequently about different situations that are arising. It could happen in Europe, it could happen in the Middle East, it could happen in Canada, it could happen in the United States. My personal feelings are that that can affect how we go about our day-to-day business, and I have faith in the institutions that are governing that my safety is being taken care of.
It's not an issue for me. I mean, I think most of it is just about promoting fear, which is, of course, we get mostly from the States, but it's not a part of my. I don't worry about it. I don't think about it. It's not like I'm in denial or anything. It's just that I don't know. I think Canada's still a safe country, So that's how I feel.
Concerned, yes, but not worried. I feel Canadians, the RCMP, have it under control. It's certainly a concern outside of Canada, but right now, personally, I don't feel all that worried about it in Canada.
Oh, quite concerned, of course, for sure, yeah. Even with the media and all the how they tell us, it's still, even though it's not happening here, it still integrates into your mind, into your thinking. So something occurs, you're thinking right away about terrorism. like there's a package on a bus that is left by itself and automatically, well, I'm not sure about around here, but in Vancouver anyway, it's everything stops and the teams are called out and they check it out, and it's just somebody had forgot their backpack or their sports bag case or whatever. Terrorists 1, us 0.
The risk, the actual actuarial risk is so low, it's not even worth contemplating. We're probably at more risk sitting here and having that tree fall on us than we are of having a terrorist attack happen to us.
I am to a certain extent. Maybe not so much in Canada, but we may be just a little too complacent about it all. And maybe I'm a little complacent because we really haven't had, well, we had the one in Parliament a few years ago, and we have had some pretty upsetting things happen. But when you think terrorist, you always tend to think United States because they're, the world is so involved in the rest of the world, and France and
0.
Not concerned.
Not concerned at all.
I think
that wouldn't stop me
I think
at all.
it's a big ploy to keep people afraid.
Really? Why do you say that?
Well, people who are afraid are inclined to do what they're told.
Yes.
Not that that's happening in Canada. I'm thinking more of the States, actually.
But you feel safe here in Canada?
Yes.
100%.
Despite some of the isolated incidents, like what happened at the Parliament building?
It's happened everywhere.
They are isolated. And I think Canada is the safest country in the world. It's a country I would rather live in than anywhere.
A lot. Long term. Not 20 years. 50 years down the road.
Why do you say that?
Because we are fighting an ideology. There is nothing to shoot on. It's an idea in the air that we don't understand.
Well, I don't lose sleep over it, but I think it's something we have to be vigilant about. Okay, I think up to now Canada's been fairly safe and secure. I think having 2 big oceans around us helps. But I think we have to be vigilant about it and not drop our guard. But like I said, I'm not losing any sleep over it yet.
I think the terrorist threats are becoming more and more vigilant in Canada now than ever before. Canada's kind of like become the forefront of news in a lot of the international news nowadays. I think something is likely to happen in Canada. However, we're not as unfriendly as the rest of the world, so it's a worrying subject for perhaps if you were in downtown or something where there's a huge number of people gathering. If something's going to happen, it's going to be in a place like downtown Toronto as opposed to somewhere in the suburb. But it's inevitable. The more and more of this kind of terrorism that you hear about every day, and nowadays it's literally once a week you'll hear about something happening somewhere around the world.
Well, I know they exist. I'm not overly concerned about them. I guess one of these days we're going to get some terrorist attack that actually is brought off and works for the terrorist. We have to face that fact.
I do not fear terrorist attacks in Canada at all. I think we're a pretty, well, I don't want to say civil country, but I think we have very few outside countries that have a lot of disdain for us or anything we do, so I don't think we're really doing anything to draw a lot of attention to us on the global at all.
So you feel safe?
I feel very safe, yeah. And I've just been through the airport recently and I know what it's like coming in and out of customs into this country, and it's very safe. Yeah.
Canada switched to the metric system in which year? 1930, 1955, 1970?
1970.
1970.
1930.
70.
70.
70.
1970. I remember taking it in school.
It's 1970.
Okay, good.
You were a good student, weren't you?
Yes, I was a good student.
Metrication began in France in the 1790s and spread over the following 2 centuries to all but 4 countries, representing 95% of the world's population, including Canada, in 1970. During the federal election, the Trudeau Liberals promised to be open, honest, and transparent with constituents and talk to them about the issues that matter. But in an age where skepticism in government is quite common, especially with expense reports of MPs and their staffers, the topic of how transparent the government is has once again come into question. So we took the topic to the voting public. Our question: how satisfied are you with transparency in the federal government?
Boy, I'm not satisfied or dissatisfied. I've never thought about it. This new guy, Trudeau, seems to be fairly transparent. If he'd stay here a little while, he always seems to be around the world. I'm not concerned about transparency. No government's transparent.
Reasonably so. I think since the Liberals got in, they've been a little bit reluctant to be completely open about things. But I can also understand that sometimes everybody's expecting them to do everything at once, and this can't be done. You know, you have to plot things, and unfortunately we get expectations about things, and they don't necessarily fit into the whole picture. But I think reasonably we're getting more transparency now than we ever had before in the last decade, so I'm happy with it.
Well, when Trudeau, when the other one, Harper was on, I was very disappointed. The way he was dealing with the day-to-day business, his secrecy, and we didn't like it. Now Trudeau, I think, is more open. Things are looking a bit better. He brought back Canada the way we want it to be. Trudeau is representing us. Harper didn't. He represents himself.
I agree. I think Trudeau is a good man. And I think he's doing a good job.
It is a challenge, again, as a new immigrant to Canada, to always get the best information available about what's happening in terms of government and how that actually influences both day-to-day and more far-reaching decisions that are made in our government structure.
I think we can be more transparent. I just don't think everybody's being open. I think there's just too many special interests being placated.
Government and transparency, I guess, it doesn't matter which government, but transparency doesn't happen. It gets talked about. That's probably the quickest answer I can give you.
So far, so good. You know, there's been a lot of stuff in the media going back and forth about, you know, certain things that are coming out, you know, that were, I guess, trying to be hid before, and even before this party got into power. But you know, there's always going to be the naysayers. There's always going to be the things going back and forth. There's always going to be things hidden. It is what it is. It's the way of human nature.
Here's a guy that says he's going to be transparent, and he's already what do you call it, acted on a lot of his promises already, insofar as transparency and being out there and not being close to the chest with the cards. So yeah.
I'm glad that they have reinstated the long-form census, for example. I'm glad that there are different, you know, opportunities for people to publish, scientists and government organizations to publish and post details surrounding their work. I don't know if I'm on target for that question, but those are issues that are important to me, and I see results that way. I think there's always room for improvement.
Our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, I see him trying to interact with our people, but he's not really actually doing anything about all the issues that we have. He's just kind of making himself visible with our people, and that's all.
The nation-to-nation treaty relationship and reconciliation, it seems like they're trying to make some type of amends and make themselves like they're actually doing something really crucial, but when we look at it in depth, it could be really concerning, and I'm a little skeptical. Yeah.
The transparency is a word that is devoid of meaning anymore. No government is transparent enough. All governments operate behind too much of a cloak of secrecy, and too many things are decided And not that they shouldn't be decided by the government, but they should be decided in open. So if there's any kind of secrecy about any action the government takes, we don't need it. But so is this federal government worse than the last federal government? I have no idea.
Canada is one of the greatest nations on earth in which to live. We have much to be thankful for. The freedoms we enjoy, our scenery, universal health care, Putin, the list goes on. But with all the good also comes the challenges. And this is where we go with our next question. What is the biggest issue facing Canada today?
Housing market, I guess. Housing prices are going ridiculously high, and I have 2 boys of my own, and I know that they're going to struggle to find to buy a home as their first home. So I don't see that this housing boom is going to stop soon, and I'm worried as to where it's going to stop.
Anything in particular you think the government can do to try to rein it in?
I'm sure there is something that the government can do in terms of perhaps stopping some of these builders in making homes here, there, and everywhere. And the more and more development happening, they're getting smaller and smaller in size, higher and higher in price, and it's just getting ridiculous. I come from the UK, and I've seen this 20 years ago, and I know what the end result's going to be, and I'm worried about that end result now.
It's not a good end result.
It's not a good result, no.
Probably, I think, keeping the healthcare system healthy, education, maintaining a good balanced curriculum, including music in all schools. As far as foreign policy is concerned, I think Canada should stay the way it is, playing fair, keeping it fair, and expecting others to do the same, but not exactly hoping they will, being prepared for the opposite.
And trying to create jobs, of course. Support the schools. Don't charge them too much if they can, because it's getting very expensive.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that concerns me is about the peacekeeping, that in fact I'm a little bit uneasy about that, because it involves getting into a really can of worms in Africa, and I would hate to see our military put in a position where they can't respond to attacks on them, which has happened in other peacekeeping operations. There again, it's a matter of balancing out, I think, and I think it can be done, but it's not something I'm terribly comfortable with.
I think the most important is the Native people, and the fact that they're not having the proper water supply in some of the smaller places, and it's kind of strange that we have that opportunity, but yet we can't take care of the people that live within our own country, which is actually originally their country. Right? So why are they not being looked after immediately as a priority?
Certainly immigration is a big issue for us, but we have to keep ourselves in touch with the economy. The economy is a very big deal. Making sure that, for me anyway, keeping the Canadian dollar up is very, very important.
Unity amongst all the cultures and all the races, I guess. Getting everybody to integrate properly and to communicate properly.
The most important issue for me as an Indigenous person would be mending the relationships with Canada and Indigenous peoples. I think they should be holding up to their promises that they made in the election last year, and so far nothing's been done. Lots of our students here are still fighting for funding.
I believe it's addressing climate change and really making solid, huge leaps towards a transition away from fossil fuels. I don't think that we need fossil fuels to make that transition. I think that we can go straight into investing in renewable energies, and specifically for Indigenous communities, because they have been under a direct assault for resource extraction for many years that has caused a lot of injustice there. And I think in order to right those wrongs, they need to make that step to be like, this is the way we're going to do it, and we're going to do work with Indigenous communities first and ensure them that they have renewable energy that isn't dependent on projects that are destructing the land because of their need for energy.
From my perspective, there's this whole dialogue around reconciliation, and a lot of it has to do with within the context of Indigenous and state relations, and a lot of it has to do with Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, like building relationships and stuff. But what a lot of people Indigenous people are talking about is, what relationship does the Canadian state have to the land? What kind of relationship do Canadians have to the land? And I think that there's a lot of work being done around environmental justice, social justice, and it's all linked to climate change. So I think that we really need to look at climate change and how it's going to affect our agricultural systems, how it's going to affect the financial systems in our economy, like down the road. Like, I'm not talking like 5 years, I'm talking like 50, 60, 70 years down the road. Because those are future generations are going to have to deal with the stuff that we're doing right now, and the decisions that we're making. So I think that we really need to, as a country, really look at our relationship with the land and energy. I think energy is a big topic of discussion that needs to be talked about.
I think the biggest issue in Canada today is interprovincial trade and infrastructure. I think those are if we can start getting reasonable trade and the flow of goods across Canada, through Canada, and inside Canada, we will prosper to a far greater degree than we will if we don't.
Which Quebec riding is represented by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? Saint-Jean, Vimy, or Papineau? Saint-Jean, Vimy, or Papineau?
Vimy.
Papineau.
Vimy.
A. Saint-Jean.
Saint-Jean.
This is a complete guess. I have no idea. I'll say Vimy.
Papineau.
It's Papineau.
3 out of 3.
Look at you now. Very good.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
The Montreal riding of Papineau is represented by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It is also Canada's smallest electoral district at only 9 square kilometers in size. That's all for this episode of Outburst. Like what you see? Well, you can check out more episodes on our website at www.cpac.ca, on our CPAC TV To Go app, and on our YouTube channel. You can also join the conversation via social media on Twitter and Instagram at CPAC_TV. I'm Glenn McGuinness, and on behalf of all my colleagues at the Cable Public Affairs channel, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.